Wonder why the call stopped. This podium clock is fast, and it gives a little display here. So it's 11:35. I don't think that's quite right. 7 or 8 minutes fast. Some good deals. Yeah, I'll take a walk through when we're done. I got a minute or two yet. Hello. Yeah, actually, we're seeing updates throughout. I mean, the cafeteria in 230 got flooded out, and yeah, I'm not sure what happened. Actually, it doesn't look like they did anything to the roof, so it must have been something to do with plumbing. But so they redid the whole cafeteria, and the conference rooms off of there all have the LCD screen, so that's pretty nice. Getting those updates. Just another minute or so. You know?
They need all these the things for charging with the sign.
Oh yeah.
I don't have a use for it, so if you could find somebody to give it to.
Oh, okay.
So it's free for charging.
Yep. Right. Okay. Yeah, actually, I didn't. How did the picnic go? I did have to miss it, but it was good weather that day, right? Yeah. Sorry I missed it. We had our division family picnic on Tuesday, Pavilion 2, and I'm in IATD. That's a lot of division to fit under Pavilion 2 because it was raining on Tuesday. So, but that was my last hurrah maybe at Tartan Park. But anyway, we'll get started here. Today we'll be talking about backing up computers. It's a topic that we like to address every couple of years here. So it's been a little while since we talked about that. So we'll be getting to that. Overall, the agenda here, so I'll show what's coming up in a couple of the next future meetings, introduction of the officers, and etc. there, new members, suggestions for topics. So coming up next month, Tom Kreutzer will be talking about TV and movies from the internet, and then the following month he'll talk about why is my PC slow. So another favorite topic that we like to address occasionally. And I just say heads up, we're not getting to regularly scheduled meeting times right now. So as the meeting time approaches, double check the website to make sure we're going to the right place at the right time. MaxSig met yesterday, and they are having still their regular meeting times, but starting next month they will start meeting on Fridays again. Over the summer they meet on Wednesdays, but starting in September they'll be meeting on Fridays again. So September 18th in the 201 auditorium, and then October 23rd again. PC Club officers, Linda Brown is our vice president. Paul Ebert is our membership secretary, but in the interim, Lowell Tooze has been helping us out. I think Paul will be back next month. We're taking back those duties full time. Mike Griffin is our treasurer and MaxSig director. Stan Miller in the back is secretary. Andrew Petrin is our communications coordinator. Tom is director at large. He's not able to make it today, and I'm Jim Homan. And I believe that at the picnic I was probably elected again, right? Actually, I didn't get an official report on that part, so members new and old, if you know your dues are due, you can pay those to Lowell 2s. And if you're changing emails, make sure to notify Lowell so that we can keep in touch. We do use email to keep in touch with the membership. If you have any suggestions for topics, email them to the board, any member of the board, or talk to one of us, or you could volunteer to present on an issue you like yourself, or you could write an article for the eBites newsletter. The website does have the past meeting slides and handouts, past meeting recordings. This one is being recorded as well, for example. The deals section and the eBites newsletter is out there. So again, if you have any hints or tips, if you want to ask a question, etc., you can send those contributions to the eBites to Tom Kreutzer. And on the handout here, I list the website again, as well as we got the QR code for that. So for example, right now, the August 2015 eBites is out there. It's got some additional info on Windows 10, suggestions on best tablets, best free software for 2015, 100 best Android apps, 10 apps every lazy person needs, and information on wireless routers. So I should check that out, but I've been too lazy, so maybe I need to go do that. So are there any questions? Actually, I've been too busy, not too lazy. I do want to read that eBites. All right, so we'll move into the topic for today, which is backing up information. So I'm going to talk about the why, what, where, how, and when to back up. And again, this is focused on PCs, particularly your desktop or laptop, where we're doing that backup, but I'd like everyone to kind of keep in mind also tablets, phones, other devices. I'm not sure what that might be. And remembering that Tom did give a talk on backing up tablets and phones. It's actually a year ago now. I just looked in June of 2014. So that it was covered in more detail in that meeting, but we'll consider some of those things today. So I do also encourage you to ask questions and comment on your experiences, and keep in mind those other devices then too. So if you want to share how it goes when you're backing up. So I assume everyone does back up. So let's actually have a show of hand. How many of you do regularly back up your computer? And maybe it's not as much as you should, or a complete one, but how many of you have actually been glad that you backed it up because you had to restore your files, right? Some kind of files. Because it's really not a matter of if you'll need a backup, but when you'll need to back up. Sometimes it's just recovering a file that you accidentally deleted, or you want to go back to a previous version. If you've got that backup, that's great. So why do we back up our information? We want to prevent data loss. It might happen because we've had a hard drive crash or other hardware failure. One of the key ones for me was I had memory that was going bad, and I didn't realize it was corrupting files, but it's actually when I went to test a file from a backup that I realized that file wasn't right. The one on my computer was okay, and it was during the backup process that I realized I had bad memory. So little caveat there that I'll repeat later. Make sure you test your backups. You might lose your data due to a lost or stolen device. You might get virus or other malware that's corrupting your files or deleting them, or you might have just human error. You accidentally deleted a file, or you modified it, saved it on top of that old file name that you wanted to keep. Another reason, though, that we might want to back up our information is if we're moving the data from one device to another. So it's a way to move it from work PC to home PC, or maybe more often from one home PC to another PC. I used my backup when I upgraded to a new PC. It was pretty easy to just take the backup and load all the data that I wanted onto the new PC when I set that up. It can make it a lot easier then to share files with family and friends. You've got an external hard drive. You can take that with you if you want to take it to somebody else if you're sharing a large amount of files. And then, of course, there's things like getting pictures off your camera that you want to put up to the cloud so that it's available on multiple devices. Or if it's your camera phone, you might be getting it up to the cloud right away. And that is a way that you're backing up your files. It's on your phone and on the cloud. So we'll consider all those things. And another reason then that you might want to back it up is to archive your files, right? So if you're doing your taxes, or if you've got a small business and you're storing those files on your computer, you definitely want a backup of those files to protect that. Or the photos that you take, your music, any music that you have out of your own, especially if you're creating it yourself, it's not something you're going to be able to get somewhere else. You want to make sure to protect that data. So use the rule of 3, or it's sometimes, actually I heard it as the 3-2-1 rule. You want to have at least 3 copies of your important data files. The original, a backup, and a second backup, or a backup of the backup. More copies can help. Those backups should be on at least 2 different devices if you want to protect it against damage that might be caused by lightning or fire or something else. If both your original and backup are on one device, they're going to get wiped out. So you want to make sure you have at least 2 different devices to protect from that. And again, if it's an actual physical loss, somebody's theft or whatever, at least one of those devices should be in an off-site location. The cloud counts, or if you actually take an external drive to a relative's house or into work, got to be another way to do that off-site location.
Just wondering that device to atmosphere, ground, on-site.
Yeah, if you have them physically separated, then that does, I mean, you got to think about it. How would you maybe lose both of those? A really aggressive thief might find them both, probably not, but then you're just down to, did you have a fire that would knock them both out? Or if it is attached at the same time, a lightning storm or something might potentially damage both. But yeah, it probably works for most of it, so it's down to what's the risk that you're going to lose them both. So yeah, good consideration. So what do you need to back up? Well, anything that you might need or want later, and I'm saying that you can't easily recreate. So again, we mentioned those tax files or business files. If you've scanned documents, if you have media files, again, especially if it's from recordings that you can't get elsewhere, it's personal things. If for download or purchase media, that's up to you. So I've got my iTunes library, for example. It's in there. I actually do back up my entire iTunes library, but anything that I purchase through iTunes, I wouldn't really need to back up. I could download those again later. So it's your choice. It does make your backup bigger. It takes more room, but it's your choice. How much do you have? How easily would it be to recreate those? And where are you going to find these files? Well, if you use the Windows operating system, users and its subfolders are where most user data is stored. So use those folders to stay organized. And in particular, users, the username will be replaced with whatever you put as the username for you on your computer. /documents is the key folder. That's also what's called My Documents, depending on how your system is set up. That maps to that actual location. So it holds your personal documents, and it's intended to be the common repository. And the key advantage of using that is it makes it easy to find all those files when you're doing a backup. And in other instances as well. iTunes and other applications will use the music folder. Pictures would automatically, by default, in many apps, be saved to the pictures folder, etc. So they're all going to be under the user's username. So it might be username Jim's PC, whatever I named my PC, documents or music or pictures, etc. You don't want to forget your email. Actually, in my Windows 7, it's found in that second location where it's users, username, app data, local, Microsoft Outlook. It's kind of buried. But if you're not going to be saving all of those users' files, make sure that you include your email if you're using a program like Outlook. I have seen it also listed where in Windows 7 it would be in that first file location, but make sure that that's included in your backup. If you're using an online email, in some sense you're done, because right, it's up on the cloud, it's available for multiple devices, etc. But maybe you're not. Depends on, again, what are you going to be using that backup for as part of it. You can access your email from any device, but internet connections go down. So if you've got a file that's on your Gmail account, say, and you want to work with it, you don't have a connection to the internet right now, it'd be nice to have a local copy. And if it's an important attachment, I prefer to actually have a copy in another backup that I control. So you can back up your Gmail, and there's this article that I reference here, and it generally includes, there's 3 ways you can do it. One is you can bring it into a desktop email client, something like Outlook or Thunderbird or whatever. You can actually, while you still leave all your email up there on the cloud on your Gmail account, so you can access it from any internet-connected device, you can have a backup copy on a desktop client. Gmail does also provide an application. It's called Gmail Backup, or there are other third-party backup services, some of which that I listed here. So that's all coming from that article that I cited. That's for Gmail. You can find something similar for if you use Yahoo Mail or other online email. But you do want to make sure that you get your email backed up. And I recommend at least downloading and backing up those important attachments. I think I included that on the previous slide. For some other file locations to consider, I refer you back to the last time that we gave a PC backup presentation. Tom Kreutzer gave that in August 2012, so you can find that again on the club website. And as I mentioned earlier in the meeting here too, Tom did give a presentation on backing up tablets and phones about a year ago. So in that case, you can use backup apps to back up to the cloud. And some examples updated from the presentation, maybe even that Tom gave, is there's Helium, G Cloud Backup. You can use Google Plus, or you can just be using Google Docs to back your phone up. You put your important, what you need back up, make sure that it gets into your Google Docs account. There's a PC Magazine article, or again, you can go back to the presentation that Tom gave about a year ago. You could also just connect your device to your computer and copy your files over, and that's something that I've done. So it can be done manually to get a good backup of the things off your phone, and that is a way then also to, if you've got a lot of photos on your phone, for example, you can do it just by connecting either wirelessly or through a USB type connection to your phone and get things backed up onto your computer, and then you can include those in the backup that you'll be doing of your overall desktop computer. So that's a way to consolidate your files onto one device. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that?
When you do that to your phone, you usually delete some of the features off your phone. You want to archive something so you cover some of your space on the phone if you're running short, is that the reason?
Yeah, that's exactly one of the things that I'll do. So you can set your phone up to back up automatically to the cloud. So you've got one backup there, and then this is another way to get one onto the computer. And when I verify that I can see the pictures on my computer and I can deal with them, then yes, that's when I'll delete them off my phone.
And when you delete them on your phone, it doesn't affect the cloud.
You got to be careful about how you do that. That's right. So, which is another reason then too to make sure you've got a good backup copy on your computer before you do that deletion, right? Again, to prevent data loss due to accidental deletion. So yeah, I delete them off my phone, and if I don't have them stored on the cloud in a way that they're not just going to sync back and say, oh, I got to delete them off the cloud now too, then yeah, I don't want to lose all copies. If you're only using the synchronization, and that could be very likely how your synchronization is set up, is I've deleted off the phone, so I deleted off other locations. Yes, and for that, I think I'll refer you back to Tom's. I'm not sure if he covered that in much detail on that, or yeah, it's something I'd have to research a little bit more about how to make sure that you got that synchronization set up right to give you more specific advice. Okay, so where should you back up? And this methodology really hasn't changed now for the last couple of years, is use external drives and rotate them. I don't know that anyone really uses tape drive backups. I don't recommend using DVDs or CDs or something like that. You can store quite a bit on DVDs, and actually I'll back up photos to DVDs as a way to share them. But for the actual backup of all your files on the computer, it's much more convenient to use external drives. And the cost per amount of storage has actually come down quite a bit. While DVDs might be cheaper, it's such a pain to use them that you're probably not going to do your backups as often as you should if you're trying to back them all up to DVDs. Unless you've got a small amount of data that you really need to back up. So 1 terabyte and up are common. They're not expensive, especially compared to losing your files. If you're buying a hard drive now, get a USB 3 and not a USB 2. USB 2 is slower. Used to seem really fast, but USB 3 is quite a bit faster now, or FireWire, Thunderbolt drive, etc. Use one of the fast connections there. So again, you don't want to be discouraged from doing your backup just because it's a pain to do. I must admit though, one of our older backup drives is a USB 2, but so after you've got the main full backup, it still works. If your internet connection is fast enough, you can back up online or use an online file hosting service. So you can back things up. Right. Yep. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but what I would recommend is that if you get into this rotating external drives, you just need to, you'll end up with one copy of each file on that backup, and then you'll have a second backup that's in the rotation. And it'll take, by using that, it'll take a little while before you end up with 2 copies of your backup, because it's when you whatever schedule you're on to rotate your drives that you'll get a second backup copy. So if you have a really important file, you might want to do that, but I wouldn't necessarily do 2 copies of or 3 or 4 copies of an individual file on each backup, unless you've got a really big external drive or not a whole lot of data to back up, and it's really important to you.
Is the backup software keep track of the different hard drives?
Well, yes. It will, in the sense of it'll keep track of when you did a full backup, and we'll cover this in a little bit, but it will keep track of when you've done the last full backup and what you've done since. And if you've been doing it on that one drive, it won't necessarily recognize. That's a good question. It won't recognize that, hey, you swapped out the drive, I should change the way I'm backing things up. That'd be a good feature. But I don't know that it does that. I've never seen that. Good suggestion.
When you buy a Western Digital or a Seagate drive, they come with backup programs.
Right.
And the backup programs they come with, those compress the files. And they seem to be using their own format.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
Should you be using that, or should you just be setting a separate backup program? And if you use it, how do you get out individual files later?
Save that question for a little bit, but do you have a comment on that?
I was making want to make reference to the Seagate. I had a Seagate doing all the backups, and they do an incremental backup in between. And I had a hard drive that crashed, and I tried to go back, and I couldn't get the stuff off the Seagate.
So that'll be one that I mentioned here too, is make sure that you can read it. So save both of those, and if I don't answer them in the next couple of slides, bring them back up and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So the questions were about what software to use. I'm repeating it for the recording. What software to use? Say you get a Seagate drive and it comes with backup software. Should you use that? And somebody who had trouble actually getting data back off a Seagate drive when they actually needed to get their recovery. But one of the options is to do backing up to the cloud. So putting things up on Google Drive, OneDrive, or formerly been called SkyDrive, the iCloud, the Apple service. There is safer in many ways because you now don't have a device that can be stolen or isn't going to be lost to fire. It can be easier once you got that set up, and then it also makes it easy to access your files from any internet connected location. They are slower depending on how fast your connection is, but that it is getting faster. Our connections to the internet are in general getting faster. And it can make it easier to consolidate data from multiple devices. So if you're backing up your computer to your Google Drive along with your phone and your tablet and everything else, you get all that information from all those devices into one location and share them back and forth.
Are you going to go over the cost of those on drives?
Actually, I don't have much information on that. It changes is part of the reason why. So I do, I've got some references back, but you do get a certain amount of free use out of Google Drive and iCloud for sure. OneDrive is less, from what I've seen, if you've got set up a personal OneDrive account, I haven't done that myself. And I'm just going to try to see if I had some of the older information on costs here. I don't. But the other thing about Google Drive, one little thing that I think is still true is if you are saving things in the Google Docs format, Google doesn't count that against your first, I think it's 5 gigabytes that you can use on Google that's for free. And a combination is often useful, and that's the way I do it. So the files that are currently in use and that you want to access from other devices, that's maybe what you put up on the cloud. But once you've got it's to the point where it's backing it up, and it's not something you're accessing very often, but maybe it is old photos that you still don't want to get rid of, that doesn't necessarily have to be up on the cloud. And again, because it does cost to store information up on the cloud if you exceed a certain amount, that's a reason to keep that data set down.
Question?
Yeah.
Is there any reason to think that SkyDrive and all of this haven't been accessed by either domestic or foreign people? You put tax information, you put medical information, financial information, sensitive, there's
right.
So so much secure.
I think the paid, so this is again, and you can get Tom's opinion on this too, but I think if I'm reflecting it right too, the paid services like Google has, or the fact that that's their bread and butter, they know that's how they're making money, are doing very well at keeping the security on the system and keeping the hackers out. But it is out there where, you know, for them to get at your physical hard drive backup, they have to get at your physical hard drive or go through the social engineering, which still is the biggest way that sensitive data is lost, is through social engineering, where somebody replies to a false email or something like that, and suddenly they've granted access to the files that are on their computer, which is connected to the internet, harder to find than a Google service. So I have not seen on those kind of things where the data has been lost. It's been more at the big attacks on other corporations. Any other information from somebody else?
Okay, question though. How often, if ever, does the cloud crash?
The servers may go down, but they do have their backups for them, so it doesn't mean that they've lost all your data, but you will temporarily potentially lose your connection to it. You have to wait until they get their servers back up online, or it is even just your whatever method you're using to connect to the internet. So your internet service provider, that will crash. And that's part of the reason why I was saying on the other ones, you might want to have local copies of things off of, say, your phone, so that you don't need your internet connection to be able to work with those files. So something that's on your Google Drive. And for that matter, though, if you install the Google Drive app, it will put a copy of those files and keep them synchronized. So you will have a copy of those Google Drive files on your actual computer as well as on the cloud, and it'll keep those in sync. So then you can work with the local copy, and when you get your internet connection back, Google Drive will automatically sync them again.
Is the data encrypted? They go to the cloud so that even if the hacker gets in their server, they couldn't read it?
Well, only as much as you've got it encrypted yourself ahead of time, right? So if you have to give authentication, well, a hacker has somehow presumably got around that authentication, so now they can get at your files. So actually, that was a point I was going to say. If you've got data files that you're backing up to the cloud, you can encrypt them, put a password on them, etc., before you back them up in the first place. And that would work even for your local copy. If they manage to get into your computer or your hard drive, if it's encrypted and they need to provide a password to get into that, then it's that much better protected. And at this point, at least a 12-character password. Brute force methods unfortunately are getting better. So a 6-character or an 8-character password can be beaten by brute force. So for those of us at 3M, we know that 3M has gotten us to that point where we're at least 12 characters, and if you're dealing with sensitive data, it's 15 characters or more, right? So use strong characters. I don't. Does anyone else? I don't have a specific one, but I mean, there's. I can check into that. Pose a question on e-bikes.
I'm using keypads.
Yes.
Which creates random passwords and stores them all on a file that you need a master password that you make up to get into, and then just copy and paste the passwords from that file into whatever application you're using. It works very well.
Yeah, so I do use KeyPass. That is a way to store your passwords. So yeah, I use KeyPass as well. That's a great way to store your passwords for access to internet sites in your personal banking account, for example, right? You got to create a strong password for that site. I can't memorize them all either, so yeah, you use KeyPass then to store those passwords. And that, of course, is encrypted, like you said, and you need the master password, protect that one very well, because if you lose that one and they happen to have a copy of your KeyPass file too, then now they've got all your passwords. But that doesn't encrypt the files themselves, that's just encrypting your copy of your passwords.
Yeah, I was going to say, TrueCrypt, there's not as much certainty about how safe it is recently. A lot of TrueCrypt containers be grabbed and backed up, aside from the 4-inch. You can take full.
Right, yep. And
grab a TrueCrypt container and send that out.
I would think you can, but I don't have that experience myself. Yeah, you can let us know. And then, and for that matter too, you got to realize that if you're doing things like that, where you've encrypted your files, and whether the question is whether or not it's encrypted well enough, well, hackers that are going out there are going to find those other files that are easy to get at. So if they run into yours, they're going to go look for the lower hanging fruit, because there's still plenty out there that they can go after. So yeah, if you're conscious about keeping things secure, that's going to help quite a bit. Yes.
Another thing on KeyPass, I have the file on my desktop at home, but on my laptop, I have the file and the program on a flash drive that is not with the laptop. So if somebody takes the laptop, they will not have that data.
Okay, so yeah, having your physical KeyPass file not even on your computer but on a flash drive is a way to keep it protected from theft. So you can keep a flash drive, for example, more physically protected. All right, so getting back to the presentation here, we had talked about backups. So there are full backups, and that's where you back up all the files that you designate to be backed up. And in particular, again, it's those locations that I mentioned before. And after you've done a full backup, you'll want to then do incremental or differential backup. So an incremental backup is any new or modified files since the last backup was done. And that's any type, whether it was a full backup or incremental. So if you're going to be doing a complete restoration, here you would need that full backup, and to get all the other files that have changed, you have to have all of the incremental backups as well. Because if you made a change on the second day after you did the full backup, and now it's the 10th day after, that file that was changed on the second day is in that incremental backup. It's not going to show up in the other backups. Another way to do it is to use a differential backup. So you do a full backup, and then any files that were changed since the full backup will get backed up in this differential backup. And so in that way you'll end up, it's somewhat similar to what Hal had been asking earlier. If you made a change since the full backup, every differential backup will include that file again. So every differential backup will include that. But the point of that is then you really only need the full backup and your last differential backup to do a restoration. The intermediate differential backups, you get redundancy in the later ones. Well, if you've got a small enough data set, you can do a full backup all the time. And then just have extra copies of that full, in that case, then I would just have extra copies of that full backup. Because you're probably not going to be switching your device out every night. But you do want to do that as well, because you can have trouble with your backup. So again, remember that rule of 3, or the 3-2-1 rule. You want at least 3 copies of your files. And if you do this rotation, you'll get there eventually. So doing the scheduled backup, so for example, maybe it's going to be a monthly rotation. On the first of the month, or whatever day you pick, you do a full backup using the drive that you just brought back home, right? You've been storing that extra drive off-site at your brother's house or somebody that you trust. And you bring it back home, and that's the time to do your full backup. And your other copy is the one that's now gone back out to that relative's house. And then do a daily incremental backup or a weekly incremental backup, depending on how often you're changing your data and how much risk you're willing to accept. And as we mentioned before, I recommend testing your backup. So again, if you've got the hard drive, most of us have additional computers around the house, right? Go ahead and hook that hard drive up to another computer and see if you can read it. And if you're using these non-proprietary, and we'll get to this in a slide or two, you should be able to just read those files like it's just another attached device. And never delete the old backup until the new backup has completed successfully and been tested. So you've got your previous device you just brought home should be big enough to hold what's already on there plus your new full backup. Otherwise, maybe it's time to buy another external hard drive. Again, you always want at least two copies. So in a sense, I guess you've got the backup that you just tested. It's going to your brother's house. That one's been backed up completely and been tested, and now you can delete the previous full backup that's 2 generations old. And who's upgraded to Windows 10? Anyone yet? And you did a good backup before you did the upgrade, right? Definitely, because when you're doing a system upgrade, there's a good chance you're going to lose access to your data, or maybe you have to, depending on how you're doing a system upgrade. So that's one example, but it's always good to do a backup before you're doing any kind of a major change. So again, echoing what Tom said, I don't recommend software that uses a proprietary format. So again, this gets back to the question about, do you use the software that came with your Seagate drive? We have a Maxtor one-touch drive, and we do use that software. That was one of the first backup ones. We've got those drives, and it has nice software, and again, it's easily read. It's not proprietary format. I can take that drive and have taken that drive to another computer and pulled files off it. And again, you just see it in the backup folder structure. Underneath the backup, it just is duplicating the folder structure that I told it to back up. So I even find the files easily because they're in the same folders that I expect to find them. What I'm using so my wife has her computer, I've got my computer, I'm using Cobian backup. It's free software, will work with any of these hard drives, and you can get the latest software there at cobiansoft.com, and there are other options.
When you run a duplicate, is it the same as an image?
Okay, we'll talk about this. These aren't image files, and that's actually farther down on the slide here. So this Cobian backup or this Maxtor one-touch software, I don't even know if that one's available. They're not creating images. They are just creating backups of the files that you're telling it to back up. And I don't do images because they're that much bigger. And the chances that it'll really save me a lot of pain and grief, I don't find is worth the investment to create the image files and keep them up to date as you do that. But some do like to do that. But if you're doing an image file, you can have problems trying to restore from that, because if you have a hard drive crash and you replace it with a different hard drive and it's a different type, sometimes you can't get, in fact, many times you cannot get that image file to load onto that new hard drive and work for you anyway. You'll still have all your data backed up there, but you're going to have to reload your operating system manually and then pull the files off of there. Will it really save you over reinstalling your operating system and the software that you have? Maybe, maybe not. Was there a comment here?
I don't know what an image file is.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, an image file is an exact copy of what's on your hard disk. So it copies the operating system and the boot sector and everything else, and then again with the right software, you can take that image file and make an exact copy on another hard drive. But depending on what software you use to create that image file, you have to have an exact duplicate of the hard drive itself. It has to be the same type and size hard drive to do that. I don't have enough experience in doing that to comment much more about that. There are programs such as this Genie Timeline that manage that for you better, so that if you use that kind of software, it will be able to take that image file and create a duplicate of your hard drive with your entire operating system and all the installed software on a different drive. But again, I find that more trouble than it's worth, because if you've done additional software updates and you didn't update your image file, it's only going to get you that far. You're going to have to install whatever software was installed after the update. Whatever updates came into your software after that update, you'll have to do again anyway. I find when I created a new system, for example, I just installed fresh and reinstalled the software, and I'd rather do that anyway. If you picked up any viruses that you wiped out and everything, you don't even have those remnants if you're doing a clean install, but you could potentially have remnants behind in your image file if you copy your entire hard drive. So if that makes sense.
So when you say when you proprietary, I mean, there's no compression.
Yeah, it doesn't use compression. It's just using the NTFS file system. So you hook it up to another computer and it can read it just fine. It's just another USB attached device. It does, so you could save some space by doing some file compression. At this point, I find that the external storage has gotten cheap enough that it's just so much easier to use the non-proprietary format. My recommendation.
If Homan issues an update, do you recommend installing it, and does that cause any problems with your backup data? Like if they come on with Homan 12,
yeah. I think Homan 11's been around for a while, but no, it doesn't. It's really just how it handles it, because that backup, the format it uses just is the file structure, and it'll have a top file name that says, full backup, say, for example, and then incremental backups showing the dates that they were done is the file structure, and then underneath, so that's the top file folder, and underneath that is just the file structure that was on your PC, the parts of it that you told it to back up. And that's what it's been, so I doubt that Homan would vary from that. So yeah, an update to a newer version of Homan should not be a problem reading old backup. And again, you don't really need Homan to read the backup. You can just attach it and read it using Windows Windows Explorer.
I was just going to add, with Western Digital hard drive, they've got their backup software that comes with it, and it's forever wanting to update the software.
Oh yeah, so yeah, comment that Western Digital has its backup software and it always wants to update. That is an advantage with Homan. I've been using it now for at least 2 years, and I think it's been Homan 11 all along. I don't think I've done any update. It might have had a little bit of an update, but that again was just to the software interface, nothing to how it does the formatting structure, and it certainly isn't one that's bugging me a lot. Actually, it sits in the background, and the main thing I'll see from Homan is if I happen to look down in the tray, it'll have a red mark to say the drive wasn't attached and you missed your latest incremental backup. But when you do it, it's smart enough to know, it's like, it doesn't skip over those files. It does the incremental backup since the previous full backup or incremental backup, and you get caught up that way.
Western Digital external hard drive uses smartware, but you could select the default it comes out of the
Oh yeah. So there is a way to tell Western Digital to stop bugging me. I don't want to update. So comment from Hale. So while I don't do an image file, you do want to make sure that you have a system repair disk in case you have some glitches with your system, and know where your product codes are. It came in really handy when I did going to a new computer, so I'm reinstalling that software onto a new computer, or if you're restoring your existing computer, you want your product codes. If you can still read the old hard drive, there are ways of finding your product codes that are stored on your hard drive, and that was included in the previous presentation as well. And I haven't used them, but online services will provide a backup application, and many, if not most of those, will offer to create a local copy on your external backup drive at the same time. So you could be making a backup to the cloud at the same time you make a backup to an external hard drive. Does anyone do anything like that? I haven't used that software myself either, so I can't comment much further on that. So that pretty much completes the discussion, what I prepared for actual backup, but there are some other considerations. So you should have that system repair disk that I mentioned before, and it's built into the Windows operating system. So you go to the control panel, back up and restore, and create a system repair disk. And it creates a DVD that you can use to repair your system if it has problems. And so keep that handy for that just in case protection. I've never actually had to use mine, but I do have them.
Is there any reason to update those or make them again? Maybe we all made them the day we bought our new computer or something.
And actually I think there is, because it will help with the updates to both the operating system and drivers, etc., that you've put on there, right? So you'll get those additional drivers that you might need, so you won't have to re-download them. Presumably they'll be on the system repair disk. And also you can use Windows System Restore. This is one that I have had when I've had a bad software install, and it could also come in handy if you've picked up a virus that you really just can't shake. You can, if it's been making changes to your registry files or something, System Restore will let you go back to previous points. Now this is not data backup. You're not going to, if you accidentally deleted a file, you can't go to System Restore and say, I want to go back a week to when I had that file. That's not what System Restore is doing. It's the system settings that it's restoring to a previous point. So maybe you installed a driver that wasn't good. It'll go back and say, I'm not going to use that new driver. I'm going to go back to using the old driver if you haven't deleted that actual file. So it's a way to get back to a previous state of your system.
How long are those restore points, let's say?
So most...
I try to go back a couple of months and it's not there anymore.
I guess that's a good point. That it's a setting that you would have in Control Panel to say how many system restore points to keep. I'm surprised that it didn't have one going back a couple of months, unless you were doing a lot of software installs or something that did that, because that's where you'll get a restore point. Is most software installations, the first thing they do is they create a restore point. So it's taking a snapshot of your registry, etc., so it knows how to go back before it does its updates. And you can force it to create a system restore point by going into the control panel, click into system protection, click the system restore, and at the bottom of that dialog box is a button to manually create a restore point. And you can do that again before you make changes to your PC. But has anyone else experienced a problem where they wanted to go back? So was there a reason you wanted to go back 2 months? Yeah, but you wanted to go back 2 months versus normally what it is like you ran into a problem and you just want to go back 1 or 2 restore points rather than a certain time period.
I have a situation where I did go back and I was able to get it restored and didn't save my data.
Yeah.
Isn't there a provision in there for you to specify the amount space available.
Yes, right.
You increase the amount of space available, you can actually have more restore.
Yeah, and that, yeah, it's a good point. It's actually the system restore. It's how much space are you giving system restore to use, and that's really what will determine how many restore points it maintains. And it'll have to get rid of the older ones. It's not that you specify the number of system restore points. So yeah, that's.
I had a new laptop with Windows 7, and it caught something, and it wouldn't work, and I could not get the restore points to work. Either try to take it in and have the whole system put back
Installed.
on, and reinstalled on Windows.
Yeah, system restore. Yeah, the system does have to be operating well enough so that it can do the system restore. A lot of what system restore is doing is going back to previous versions of your registry file, which is if it's having trouble with that whole operation in the first place, then I could see where that might be a reason why the system restore functionality was not working. But I haven't run into that. I had a bad software install, went back to system restore, the system worked the way it had been, and then on the second attempt the software install went fine. So
Was it all where a person could find where that restore point is, so you can archive it or reminder or something independent of the computer?
how, yeah, could you archive the restore points as part of your backup? You probably could. It's not something I've done, so maybe another question for e-bikes. It is on your computer, yeah. But yeah, and it would be protected. So there probably is a way to do it, because you can back up registry files, etc. I mean, so there would be a way to do it. I don't know about the easy way, and I'm not sure if I'd really want to. I guess generally it's, if you have a couple restore points, you notice the problem right away, so you go back to just one or two previous.
On a previous slide, you referred to Windows backup.
Yes.
We'll send out notices, maybe when I say we're not using Windows backup. Why would you use it?
So I mean, if you're not a member of the PC club and you don't know that there are alternatives, Windows backup is certainly better than not backing up at all, because it is. Yeah, well, Windows backup will create backups to an external backup drive as well, but then you need Windows backup on another computer to be able to read that. It does use a proprietary format, so that's why I don't recommend doing that. It's not so easy to just attach it and grab one or two files. I've done that when I wanted to grab files from one computer to another. You can just use the backup. The files are already there. So that's one way to do it. But Windows backup does not make that easy. It's more a matter of backing up whatever data you've specified again. And as far as the reminders that Windows will give you that you're not using backup, you can tell it. And I don't know the specifics on this, I'd have to go into the operating system, but you can essentially tell it, I'm using an alternative backup, stop bugging me. So, and then it will stop giving you that reminder that you need to set up a backup system. So if you're getting those reminders that you don't have a backup set up, if you know that you do, you can essentially say, yes, I do have backup, and you'll stop getting those reminders.
If these backup points don't work, is there a full system restore, at the level of the full system restore, or the original operating system is, like you used to get disks when you bought computers? I thought now there was an original copy of the operating system that you could restore, like the full system restore. It's different from the backup points.
Yes. So there's two parts of that. System repair has a lot of that, and then you can actually have, if you're just talking about the operating system, you can have system image files, ISO files, that you can download And again, you need to have a valid copy, so you need your product key and your key code in order to do that installation, because it'll go out to Microsoft and say, is this a valid copy? So you want to, like, yeah, you could have that. That's actually what I did when I upgraded to a new system. My upgrade was actually getting my son's old computer, and what I did is I just did a clean reinstall of the same operating system back onto it. So you use that system file. I don't think that actual system file sits there. That system image file sits there like that. It's installed on your computer, but that's getting a little bit out of my area of expertise. If you want to do a follow-up with someone else, you can do and verify that. So yeah, if you want to just go back to, all right, I just want to go back to where I was on day one when I took it out of the box.
You used to get discs.
Right, and that's why I was saying that, so instead of having that discs, because they don't want to provide the physical media and the costs that go with it, you can download the equivalent of that. You can download and put it on, it'll fit onto a DVD, one DVD at least easily, if not one CD.
When my hard drive crashed, we took that recovery, did that restore disk or whatever it was we made originally.
Yeah.
And we put that in, and it took the computer, the new hard drive, back to that original point.
Right.
But then we had to do all the updates and everything else from that point
Yes.
on, you know, to get it back up to where it should be.
Right.
Tried to put the contents back off the Western Digital drive, and it didn't work.
And that's why you couldn't get the Western Digital.
Yeah, it took everything completely,
Yeah.
rebuilt the drive. It was a brand new drive out of a new box. Put in,
No, I thought it just affected the operating system.
that was everything.
Yeah, and so if you do have a hard drive crash, sometimes you can read some of the information off it. There are external boxes then that you can plug your hard drive into, so that you wouldn't necessarily have to give up on it completely. So you can plug it in, and then also if you're just upgrading to a larger hard drive, you can keep your older drive then just as an external drive. I wouldn't recommend it as a backup drive. I mean, for actual system or file data backup, but it's one that you can use for transferring files, etc.
Yeah, Best Buy told me they could take the data off that drive and restructure it, but it was a mechanical problem with the drive.
Yeah.
The data on the drive. And they said they could go back and actually physically, if I wanted to pay, I think it was $85 or whatever, they could take another drive and put everything that was on that drive originally, all the data back over. I have backed up, you know, other ways, but my Seagate drive didn't allow me to do the backup off of it.
Okay. So far, I don't know. So stay tuned on how Windows 10 affects all this. I think Windows 10 is keeping basically the same sort of file structure, and I've been saying Windows 7 because that's my experience, but Windows 8 was really pretty much the same, and I think Windows 10 is also going to keep the same, but I haven't done that. Does anyone have experience with that, Windows 10 and the file structure that they're using? So if you're doing a backup, will you find the files in the same place? I don't know. That's what I have for today.
There are a few things from the picnic that we don't use anymore, so if anybody needs a set of tongs or sound things, go ahead and make them. If you don't take them, I'll take them.